Picture this. The entire royal court packed shoulder to shoulder, waiting for the Alpha King to announce his bride. The torches were lit, the music had stopped, and the whole hall was so silent you could actually hear the banners moving on the walls. Everyone expected the perfect, elegant, royal beta's daughter to be chosen. But right as the king lifted his hand to speak, I walked in, completely by accident. And that one mistake changed everything. Not just any bride. The bride. The woman who would stand beside the most powerful shifter in the realm. The woman who would become queen. The woman whose children would inherit a kingdom that stretched farther than most people could travel in a lifetime. This wasn't just a wedding announcement. This was the event. The kind of moment people would talk about for generations. I was there, they'd say to their grandchildren. I witnessed history. Everyone knew what was going to happen. I mean, everyone. It wasn't even a secret. The royal beta's daughter, this absolutely stunning woman with perfect posture and a smile that could make grown men weep, she was standing there, right beside the king. Confident. Radiant. Already looking every inch the queen she was about to become. Her name was Serafina, though most people just called her Lady Sarah.
And why wouldn't they?
She was that kind of person. The kind who didn't need a full name, because everyone already knew who you were talking about. Beautiful didn't even begin to cover it. She had this way of moving, like she was floating just slightly above the ground, like gravity was a suggestion rather than a law. And smart? Don't even get me started. She could speak 5 languages, play 3 instruments, and apparently once negotiated a trade agreement that saved the kingdom thousands in gold. At 19. So yeah, perfect bride for a perfect king. Makes sense, right? The ceremony had been planned for months. I'd heard the other servants talking about it constantly. The flowers had been imported from the southern territories. The wine was from vineyards that only harvested once every 7 years. The musicians had been practicing the ceremonial songs in spring. Even the torches, hundreds of them lining the walls, had been specially made to burn with this particular golden glow that was supposed to symbolize prosperity or eternal love or something equally poetic. Everything was perfect. Everything was planned. Everything was going exactly as it should. And then I showed up. Now, let me be clear about something. I wasn't trying to crash the ceremony. I wasn't secretly in love with the king or plotting to steal someone's moment. I wasn't even supposed to be in that part of the palace. My job, my very simple, very straightforward job, was to help in the kitchens and bring refreshments to the servants' quarters. That's it. Stay in the background. Be invisible. Don't cause problems. But here's what happened, and I swear this is the truth. I got lost. I know. How do you get lost in a place you work? You're probably thinking. And that's a fair question. But you have to understand, the palace is massive. It's not just big, it's labyrinthine. There are corridors that look identical, staircases that seem to lead nowhere, doors that open into rooms you didn't know existed. I'd been working there for 6 months, and I still took wrong turns regularly. That day, I'd been sent to deliver wine to some nobles who were preparing in one of the side chambers. Simple enough, right? Except I'd been given directions by Marcus, this older servant who'd worked at the palace for 30 years and seemed to think everyone had memorized the layout as thoroughly as he had. Down the east corridor, past the tapestry of the first hunt, left at the silver candlesticks through the blue door, and there in the 3rd room on the right. Easy. Except there were 3 tapestries depicting hunts in that corridor. And I swear I'd never seen any silver candlesticks before. And was it the blue door or the door that led to the blue room? Because those are 2 different things, Marcus. So there I was, holding this heavy silver tray laden with crystal glasses and a bottle of wine that probably cost more than I'd make in a year, trying desperately to figure out where I was supposed to be going. I'd already turned around twice. I could hear the ceremony starting, the deep, resonant sound of the ceremonial horns echoing through the stone halls. I was panicking. Not like, oh no, I'm going to be late panicking. More like, I'm going to get fired and probably thrown in the dungeons for incompetence panicking. Because you don't mess up on a day like this. You just don't. So I did what any rational, totally not panicking person would do. I picked a door at random and walked through it. And that door? That door led directly into the grand hall, not to a side entrance, not to some discreet servant's passage where I could slip in unnoticed. No, no. That would have been too easy, too merciful. This door opened right onto the main floor where everyone, and I mean everyone, could see. I want you to really understand what happened in that moment. Try to put yourself in my shoes. 1 second, you're lost in a quiet corridor, stressed but relatively anonymous. The next second, you're standing in front of approximately 500 people, including every noble, every high-ranking military officer, every important person in the entire kingdom. And they're all staring at you. All of them. The silence that fell over that hall. I've never experienced anything like it. It wasn't just quiet. It was weighted. Like the air itself had suddenly become solid. The ceremonial music cut off mid-note. The priest, who'd been in the middle of some profound statement about destiny and leadership, just stopped talking. His mouth literally hung open. I froze. Completely, utterly froze. My hands were still holding the tray, but I couldn't feel them. I couldn't feel anything except this overwhelming, crushing realization that I had just made the biggest mistake of my entire life. The grand hall, which moments before had seemed so alive with anticipation, was now a tableau of shocked faces. Hundreds of pairs of eyes, all locked on me. Not because I was special, not because I was important, but because I was wrong. I was the flaw in the perfect painting, the discordant note in the symphony. I didn't belong there, and everyone knew it. I could see it in their faces. Confusion, annoyance, curiosity. Some looked offended, like I'd personally insulted them by existing in their space. Others looked almost amused, like I was an unexpected bit of entertainment. A few looked concerned, probably for me, probably knowing that I was about to face some serious consequences. But none of that compared to her look. Lady Seraphina, the chosen bride, the woman who was supposed to be having the most important moment of her life. When our eyes met, I swear I felt my soul try to leave my body. Have you ever seen someone look at you with such pure, concentrated fury that you could physically feel it? Like their anger was a tangible force? That was this. Her eyes, these beautiful amber eyes that normally looked so warm and welcoming, had gone completely cold. Hard, like looking into frozen stone. She didn't move, didn't speak, but her expression said everything. How dare you? How dare you ruin this moment? How dare you even breathe the same air as me right now? And honestly, I agreed with her. I wanted to melt into the floor. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to reverse time by about 30 seconds and make literally any other choice than walking through that door. My mind was racing, trying to figure out how to fix this. Should I apologize? Should I back out slowly? Should I just drop the tray and run? What's the protocol for accidentally crashing the most important royal ceremony in decades? They don't exactly cover that in servant training. I started to take a step backward. Just one. One small, careful step toward the door I'd just come through. Maybe I could slip back out. Maybe everyone would just forget this happened? Unlikely, but I was desperate. But then something stopped me. Not something. Someone. The king turned. Until that moment, I'd only seen King Aldrich from a distance, usually from across a room or from a servant's corridor, where we could watch but not be seen. He was imposing even from far away, tall, broad-shouldered, with this presence that seemed to fill whatever space he occupied.
Dark hair that he kept tied back.
Strong features that looked like they'd been carved from granite. The kind of man you instinctively knew was powerful, even if you'd never heard of him before. But now he was turning toward me. Slowly, deliberately. And with each degree of movement, I felt my heart beat faster. When his eyes finally found mine, everything else in the room seemed to disappear. I know how that sounds. Trust me, I know. It sounds like something out of a cheap romance novel. Their eyes met, and the world fell away. Yeah. I would have rolled my eyes at that sentence just yesterday. But I'm telling you, that's exactly what it felt like. His eyes were gray. Storm cloud gray. The kind of gray that could be calm one moment and devastating the next. And they were looking at me with this expression that I couldn't quite read. It wasn't anger. It wasn't confusion. It was something else entirely. Recognition. But that didn't make sense. He didn't know me. Why would he? I was a servant. One of probably hundreds working in the palace. We'd never spoken. Never been in the same room before this moment. I was nobody to him. And yet he was looking at me like he knew me. Or like some part of him did. The silence stretched. 1 second.
2.
3. Each one feeling longer than the last. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I could hear the sound of my breath. Too fast, too shallow. Someone in the crowd coughed. It sounded like thunder. And then he moved. Just a small movement, really. He shifted his weight, turning more fully toward me. The movement was subtle, but in that silent hall, it might as well have been a shout. The murmurs started then. Low at first, barely audible. Like the distant rumble of an approaching storm. People leaning toward each other, whispering behind hands, eyes darting between the king, the bride, and me. Who is she? What's she doing here? Is this part of the ceremony? She's just a servant. Why is he looking at her like that? I wanted to answer them. I wanted to shout. I don't know. I'm just as confused as you are. I'm nobody. This is a mistake. But my voice had apparently decided to take a vacation. No sound would come out no matter how hard I tried. The guards started moving. I saw them in my peripheral vision, stepping forward from their positions along the walls. Their hands hadn't gone to their weapons yet, but they were tense, ready, waiting for an order. To arrest me? To escort me out? To do something worse? I didn't know. I didn't want to find out. I tried to step back again, to put distance between myself and this situation that I absolutely should not have been in. My hands were shaking so badly that the glasses on the tray were starting to rattle against each other, creating this soft tinkling sound that seemed obscenely loud in the tense silence. I'm sorry, I managed to whisper. The words barely made it past my lips. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to. What's your name? The king's voice cut through everything. It wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. It carried weight. Authority. The kind of voice that expected to be heard and obeyed. And it was directed at me. Every single person in that hall turned to look at me, waiting, expecting an answer. My mouth went dry. My name? He was asking my name? Why would he care what my name was? He should be telling the guards to remove me. He should be getting back to his ceremony, to his perfect bride, to the moment that I'd so rudely interrupted. But instead, he was standing there, his storm-gray eyes locked on mine, waiting for me to answer a simple question. What was my name? For a terrifying moment, I couldn't remember. My own name.
Gone.
Vanished. My mind had apparently decided that this was just too much stress and had shut down all non-essential functions, including, apparently, basic self-identification. My voice cracked. I swallowed hard, trying again. Elena. My name is Elena.
There.
I'd said it. Just a name. My simple, unremarkable name that dozens of other girls in the kingdom probably shared.
Nothing special about it.
Nothing memorable. But the way he repeated it, Elena. He said it softly, almost like he was tasting it, testing it out. And there was something in the way he spoke it that made my name sound different. Not like the harsh Elena I usually heard when I'd mess something up, or the dismissive Elena when someone was trying to get my attention. This was different. This was gentle, careful, like my name was something precious. I didn't understand. None of this made sense. And then I felt it. It started as a warmth in my chest. Small at first, barely noticeable. I thought maybe it was just adrenaline or fear, or the fact that I was pretty sure I'd forgotten to breathe for the past 30 seconds. But it grew, spreading outward from the center of my chest, flowing down my arms, up my neck. Not painful, but intense. Undeniable. Like sunlight breaking through clouds, or the first rush of warmth when you step in from the cold. And then light. Soft at first, barely visible. A faint glow that seemed to emanate from my skin itself. I looked down at my hands, still clutching that stupid tray, and watched as delicate patterns began to trace themselves across my skin. Like someone was drawing on me with light itself. The moon mark. I'd heard of it, of course. Everyone had. It was legend.
Myth.
The kind of thing old women told stories about on winter nights. The moon goddess, they said, would mark her chosen with a sign. A blessing. A designation of destiny. But those were just stories. Fairy tales. Not real. Except it was happening.
Right now.
Right here, in front of 500 witnesses. The glow was subtle, visible, but not blinding. The marks themselves were intricate. Swirls and curves and symbols I didn't recognize, spreading across my arms, my collarbone, probably my face, though I couldn't see it. They pulsed gently, in time with my heartbeat. I couldn't breathe.
Couldn't think.
This wasn't possible. This didn't happen to people like me. The moon goddess didn't choose servants. She chose nobles, royalty, people who mattered. Not me. Never me. But the marks didn't care what I thought. They continued their pattern, completing whatever design they were creating, glowing softly against my skin. And the king saw them. I knew he did, because his expression changed. His eyes widened just slightly, and something that might have been wonder crossed his face. Or maybe shock. Or maybe recognition of something he'd been waiting for. For a moment, just a brief, perfect moment, I thought maybe no one else had noticed. Maybe it was just between him and me. Maybe we could pretend this wasn't happening. Then I heard the gasp. Lady Seraphina. Her hand had flown to her mouth, her amber eyes wide with horror and fury and disbelief all mixed together. Witchcraft. The word came out sharp, cutting. An accusation and a condemnation all at once. She pointed at me with a shaking finger, her perfect composure finally cracking. She's using witchcraft. Dark magic. This is an abomination. The hall erupted. Suddenly, everyone was talking at once.
Shouting.
Some in agreement with Lady Seraphina, others in confusion, others in what might have been fear. The guards drew their weapons now, the sound of steel singing against leather scabbards cutting through the chaos. Seize her. Protect the king. What is that light? The moon mark? It can't be. Impossible. She's manipulating us. I backed up, nearly dropping the tray, my eyes darting around for an escape route. There wasn't one. I was surrounded by angry, scared, confused people who thought I was some kind of threat. Some kind of dark sorceress who'd come to ruin their perfect ceremony. The marks on my skin pulsed brighter, responding to my panic, and that just made everything worse. People screamed. Backed away. The guards advanced, swords drawn, faces grim. This was it. This was how I died. Accused of witchcraft I didn't perform, marked by a goddess I didn't understand, surrounded by people who wanted me gone. I should have stayed in the kitchen. I should have asked for better directions. I should have. Enough. The king's voice boomed through the hall, and everyone froze. Not like before, when they'd been shocked into silence. This was different. This was the voice of an alpha. A command that couldn't be disobeyed even if you wanted to. Every person in that room stopped mid-motion. Guards halted their advance. Nobles closed their mouths mid-shout. Even Lady Seraphina went silent, though her face was still twisted in rage. King Aldrich stepped forward, moving past his chosen bride without a glance. His eyes never left me as he walked, slow and deliberate, closing the distance between us. I should have run. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But I couldn't move. Partially because of his alpha command still hanging in the air. But mostly because I didn't want to. Despite everything, despite the chaos and the fear and the absolute insanity of the situation, I didn't want to run from him. He stopped a few feet away, close enough that I could see the silver flecks in his gray eyes, close enough that I could hear his steady breathing even over the pounding of my own heart. For a long moment, he just looked at me, really looked at me, like he was seeing something deeper than my face, deeper than the marks glowing on my skin, like he was seeing into the very core of who I was. And then he spoke, not to me but to the hall, to everyone watching this impossible moment unfold. The ceremony is cancelled. The words fell like stones into water, creating ripples.
Waves.
A tsunami of shock and disbelief. Cancelled? The ceremony that had been planned for months? The union that was supposed to strengthen the kingdom? The moment everyone had been waiting for? Cancelled? My lord, you can't. Lady Seraphina started, her voice shrill with desperation. I can, he interrupted, still not looking at her.
Still looking at me.
And I have. He turned then, addressing the crowd with that same commanding presence that had silenced them before. The moon mark, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast hall, is not witchcraft. It is not dark magic. It is the oldest, most sacred sign of our people. A mark that has not been seen in generations. A sign from the moon goddess herself. He paused, letting his words sink in. I could see people exchanging glances. Uncertain, confused, but unable to argue with their king. And it has chosen, he continued, someone unexpected. His eyes found mine again, and this time, there was something in them that made my breath catch.
Certainty.
Decision. Finality. Destiny, he said, and I knew he wasn't just talking to the crowd anymore.
He was talking to me.
To everyone who thought they knew how this story was supposed to go. Destiny does not need permission. The silence that followed was different from before. Not shocked. Not confused. This was the silence of acceptance. Of understanding that something fundamental had just shifted. Lady Seraphina let out a sound somewhere between a sob and a scream. I risked a glance at her and immediately wished I hadn't. If looks could kill, I would have been dead 100 times over. Her face was a mask of rage and humiliation and betrayal. She'd been moments away from becoming queen. Moments away from everything she'd been raised for, prepared for, promised. And I'd taken it from her. Not intentionally. Not maliciously. But I'd taken it nonetheless. This isn't over, she hissed, her voice low enough that maybe only I could hear it. A promise. A threat. This isn't over. Then she turned and swept from the hall, her attendants scrambling to follow her, her elaborate dress trailing behind her like the wake of a storm. The crowd began to disperse, slowly at first, then faster. Murmuring. Whispering. Already crafting the stories they'd tell about this day. About the servant girl who walked into destiny. About the ceremony that never was. About the king who chose fate over tradition. And through it all, he stood there. King Aldrich. The Alpha King. Looking at me, with those storm-gray eyes. I realized the tray was still in my hands. Still clutching it like it was the only real thing in a world that had gone completely mad. The wine and glasses rattled with the tremors running through my arms. I should say something. I should apologize or explain or something. But what do you say in a moment like this? Sorry I ruined your wedding? Thanks for not having me executed? I promise I'm not a dark sorceress. This is all as confusing to me as it is to you. I opened my mouth, but he spoke first. You tried to leave. It wasn't a question. More of an observation. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Quietly, he continued. You tried to slip away. To disappear. Another nod. What else could I do? For the first time since this whole thing started, I saw him smile. Not a big smile. Just a small quirk of his lips. But it transformed his face, made him look less like an untouchable king and more like a person. You didn't ruin the ceremony, Elena, he said, and the way he said my name sent shivers down my spine. Gentle. Careful. Like before. I wanted to argue. To point out that I absolutely, definitely, 100% had ruined the ceremony. But something in his expression stopped me. He took another step closer. Close enough now that I could see the faint scar above his left eyebrow. Close enough that his scent, pine and mountain air, and something uniquely him, washed over me. You didn't ruin the ceremony, he repeated, his voice dropping lower, more intimate. Meant for me alone. He paused, his eyes searching mine, and then said the words that would change everything. You are the ceremony. The words hit me like a physical force. I actually stumbled back a step, would have dropped the tray if he hadn't reached out and steadied me with a hand on my elbow. Even through the fabric of my sleeve, I could feel the warmth of his touch. The strength. I don't understand, I whispered because I didn't. None of this made sense. The marks on my skin were still glowing softly, a constant reminder that something impossible was happening. Neither do I, he admitted, and that might have been the most shocking thing yet. A king admitting he didn't have all the answers. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt when you walked into that hall. What did you feel? The question escaped before I could stop it. He smiled again, a bit wider this time. Like I'd been waiting for you my entire life, without knowing it.
Oh.
This was real. This was actually happening. The Alpha King, who was supposed to marry the perfect noble bride, was standing here, telling me, a servant who got lost on her way to deliver wine, that he'd been waiting for me. The rational part of my brain was screaming that this was insane. That tomorrow I'd wake up and realize this had all been a very vivid, very strange dream. That there was no way this could be real. But the marks on my skin were still glowing. His hand was still on my elbow, warm and steady. His eyes were still looking at me like I was something precious, something worth protecting, something worth choosing. This was my life now. Somehow, impossibly, this was my life. And you know what? I still had no idea what I was doing. I still didn't feel like I belonged in this story. I still felt like an ordinary girl who'd made an extraordinary mistake. But maybe that was the point. Maybe destiny isn't about being ready. Maybe it's about being there. About walking through the wrong door at exactly the right time. About being brave enough to stay when every instinct tells you to run. Maybe I didn't have to understand it all right now. Maybe I just had to take the next step. And the next. And see where this impossible path led. What happens now? I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. The king, Aldrich, I supposed I should start thinking of him as, since apparently we were, something now looked toward the rapidly emptying hall, then back at me. Now, he said, we figure this out together. The moon goddess has given us a sign, but not a map. We'll have to find our own way. I'm just a servant, I protested weakly. You were a servant, he corrected gently. Now you're the woman bearing the moon mark. Now you're... He paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully. Now you're mine. If you'll have me. If I'd have him? The Alpha King was asking if I'd have him? The absurdity of it all hit me, and I felt a laugh bubbling up. Not a nervous laugh. Not a hysterical laugh. Just genuine amusement at how completely upside down my world had become in the span of maybe 10 minutes. I walked through the wrong door, I said, shaking my head in disbelief. The right door, he corrected. Just not the one you intended. I was bringing wine to some nobles. You were bringing yourself to me. I'm going to get fired. You're going to be a queen. That stopped me.
Queen.
The word hung in the air between us, heavy with implications I couldn't even begin to process. I don't know how to be a queen, I said, and it came out more plea than statement. I don't know how to explain what I felt when I saw you walk in, he countered. I don't know why the moon mark chose you, or what it means, or what challenges we'll face because of it. I don't know a lot of things, Elena. But I know I'm not letting you walk back out that door and disappear from my life. The marks on my skin pulsed once more, brighter, as if in agreement. I took a deep breath. Let it out slowly. The wine glasses on the tray had finally stopped rattling. My hands had steadied. My heartbeat had slowed from its frantic pace to something almost normal. This was happening. This was real. And I had a choice to make. Run, like I tried to do. Slip back through that door and pretend none of this ever happened. Go back to being invisible, ordinary, safe. Or stay. Step forward into this impossible situation with this impossible man and see where it led. Risk everything. Risk being seen. Risk matching. When you put it that way, there was really only one choice. Okay, I said, and the word felt like jumping off a cliff.
Okay.
I'll stay. His smile then, it was like sunrise. Warm and bright and full of promise. Thank you, he said simply. For what? For being brave enough to walk through that door. He gestured to where I'd entered, that innocent doorway that had led me here, for being brave enough to stay. I don't feel brave, I admitted. I feel terrified. Good, he said, surprising me. That means you understand the magnitude of what's happening. False bravery is just ignorance. True bravery is being scared and doing it anyway. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I thought about Lady Seraphina, about the fury in her eyes, about her whispered threat, about the hundreds of other nobles who'd watched this unfold and were probably already plotting, planning, figuring out how to use this scandal to their advantage. I thought about all the things I didn't know how to do. Court politics, royal protocol, being in the spotlight instead of the shadows, being someone who mattered instead of someone who could be overlooked. I thought about all the ways this could go wrong, all the ways I could fail, all the ways I could prove that I didn't deserve this, didn't belong here, wasn't worthy of a mark from the moon goddess herself. But I also thought about the way he'd said my name, the way he'd looked at me, the way he'd stopped an entire ceremony because Destiny had other plans. And I thought about those marks on my skin, still glowing softly, a constant reminder that something bigger than me, bigger than any of us, had set this in motion. Maybe I didn't need to understand it all. Maybe I just needed to take the next step. So I did. I handed him the tray, because I couldn't very well carry it around for the rest of my life, and when he took it, looking slightly bemused, I squared my shoulders and met his eyes. "What's first?" I asked. "What do we do now?" His eyes lit up with approval and maybe a little bit of relief, like he'd been half afraid I'd change my mind. "Now," he said, setting the tray aside on a nearby table, "I introduce you to my council. They're probably in an uproar. And then we figure out how to handle the politics of this. And then..." He paused, a slight frown crossing his face. "Actually, do you have family? People who should be informed." Family. The word sent a pang through my chest. My mother died when I was young. My father, he's in the southern villages. We're not close. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it. I could see it in his eyes. "It's okay. I've learned to manage on my own. You won't have to anymore," he said firmly. "You'll have me. You'll have the pack. You'll have..." A commotion at the far end of the hall interrupted him. A group of stern-looking men in formal attire were approaching, their faces ranging from concerned to outright alarmed. The council, I assumed. Aldrich sighed. That didn't take long. "Are you ready?" Was I ready to face a council of powerful men who'd just watched their king's carefully planned marriage dissolve in favor of me? A servant girl they'd never heard of? Not even remotely. Yes, I lied. He saw through it, of course. But he appreciated the effort. I could tell by the way his hand briefly squeezed mine before he released it to face his approaching advisors. "Your Majesty," the lead councilman began, his tone carefully controlled. "We must speak. Privately. Anything you have to say to me can be said in front of Elena," Aldrich replied, his tone brooking no argument. The councilman's eyes flicked to me, taking in the still glowing marks on my skin, the simple servant's dress, the lack of any noble bearing or training. I saw his assessment in real time. Not good enough. Not suitable. Not acceptable. "Your Majesty," he tried again. "With all due respect, the situation with Lady Seraphina is resolved." Aldrich cut him off. "She is no longer my betrothed. Elena bears the moon mark. The goddess has made her choice clear. But the Beta's family will be compensated appropriately for any perceived slight. But I will not marry a woman the goddess has not chosen for me. Would you have your king ignore a divine sign?" That shut him up. Clever. What could they say to that? Argue against the moon goddess herself? The councilman's jaw worked silently for a moment before he managed. "Of course not, Your Majesty. But the girl." "Elena," Aldrich corrected sharply. "Her name is Elena. And she is under my protection. Anyone who wishes to challenge that can take it up with me personally." The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. The councilman shifted uncomfortably. "We mean no disrespect." Another councilman spoke up, this one older with kind eyes. "But surely you can understand our concern. This is unprecedented." The moon mark has not appeared in living memory. We have no protocols for this. No preparations. And the young woman herself. He looked at me, not unkindly. Has she been trained for court? Does she understand the responsibilities she'll face? No, I said, before Aldrich could answer for me. All eyes turned to me, and I fought the urge to shrink back. I don't know anything about being at court. I don't know the protocols, or the politics, or any of it. I'm a servant. I spent this morning in the kitchens trying to figure out how many pastries to make for the feast. I saw several of the councilmen's faces harden, confirming their suspicions, proving I wasn't suitable, but I wasn't done. However, I continued, forcing my voice to stay steady. I do know how to learn. I know how to work hard. I know how to listen and adapt and do what needs to be done. And if the moon goddess thought I was worth marking, maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe I'm not supposed to fit into the mold you've already created. Maybe I'm supposed to make a new one. Silence. The councilman stared at me. Aldrich was trying very hard not to smile. I could tell. The older councilman with the kind eyes spoke first. Well said, young lady. Well said indeed. He bowed slightly to me. I am Councilman Thaddeus. And I, for one, would like to welcome you to court. The road ahead will not be easy, but if you face it with that kind of spirit, you may just surprise us all. One down. Several more to go, based on the still skeptical faces surrounding us. The important thing now, Aldrich said, taking control of the conversation again, is ensuring Elena's safety and comfort. She'll need quarters prepared, suitable clothing, a guard detail until we're certain everyone understands she's under royal protection. I don't need a guard, I protested. Yes, he said firmly, you do. Lady Serafina is not the only one who will see you as a threat. And until everyone understands that harming you means answering to me, you will have protection. Non-negotiable. The steel in his voice told me arguing would be pointless. Fine, I conceded. But I'm not going to hide away like some fragile flower. If I'm doing this, I'm doing it properly. A flicker of approval in those storm-gray eyes. I wouldn't expect anything less. The next few hours were a blur. I was swept up in a whirlwind of activity I could barely process. Servants, my former colleagues, I supposed, were summoned to prepare rooms for me. Not just any rooms. Rooms in the royal wing, next to the king's own quarters. That caused more than a few raised eyebrows. I was measured for new clothes. Dozens of them, apparently. Gowns and dresses and shoes and accessories I couldn't even name. A seamstress clucked her tongue at my measurements, muttering about how I'd need proper foundation garments and a lady's figure. I wanted to tell her my figure had gotten me through 22 years just fine, but bit my tongue. There was talk of tutors, etiquette lessons, history, politics, dance, music, languages. The list went on and on until my head spun. Through it all, the marks on my skin continued to glow softly. A constant reminder that this wasn't a dream. This was my new reality. Somewhere in the chaos, I was finally left alone. Just for a moment. Just long enough to sink onto the edge of an elaborately carved chair in what was apparently now my sitting room and let the weight of everything crash over me. This morning I'd been Elena the servant. Tonight I was, what exactly? The woman with the moon mark. The woman the king had chosen over a noble bride. The woman who'd accidentally walked into destiny. I looked down at my hands, at the delicate patterns still traced in light across my skin. They were beautiful in their own way. Otherworldly. Proof that something bigger than me was at work here. But they were also a target. A sign that I was different. Special. And I'd learned long ago that being special could be dangerous. A soft knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. Come in, I called, expecting another servant with more measurements or questions or instructions. Instead, Aldrich stepped through the door, and suddenly the enormous room felt much smaller. I wanted to check on you, he said, closing the door behind him. It's been rather overwhelming, I imagine. That's one word for it, I said, managing a weak smile. I keep waiting to wake up. He crossed the room to stand before me. Close, but not threateningly so. It's real, Elena. All of it. I know. I gestured helplessly at the room around us, at the luxurious furnishings and silk curtains and the bed that could probably fit 5 people comfortably. This morning I was worrying about whether I'd burned the breakfast pastries. Now I'm here, and I still don't really understand why. The moon goddess. I know, I interrupted. The moon goddess chose me.
But why?
Why me? What does she see that I don't? What am I supposed to do with this? I held up my hands, the marks pulsing softly. He was quiet for a moment, considering. Then he did something unexpected. He knelt in front of me, bringing himself to my eye level. I don't know, he admitted. I've been asking myself the same question. Why you? Why now? Why this way? But, Elena. He took my hands in his, and I felt that same warmth from before. That sense of rightness. Maybe we're asking the wrong question. What do you mean? Maybe it's not about why you were chosen. Maybe it's about what we do now that you have been. The goddess gives signs, but we still have to walk the path ourselves.
I thought about that.
About the choice I'd made in the grand hall.
To stay.
To step forward into the unknown. I'm scared, I confessed. Of failing. Of not being good enough. Of letting you down. Of proving everyone right who thinks I don't belong here. Good, he said, echoing his words from earlier. Fear means you understand what's at stake. But let me tell you something, Elena. In the 5 minutes I've known you, you've already proven yourself braver and more honest than half the nobles at court. You spoke truth to my counsel when you could have stayed silent. You stood your ground when you could have run. You accepted a destiny you didn't ask for with more grace than I would have. I didn't feel graceful. I felt terrified. You were both, he said with a slight smile. And that's exactly what I need. What the kingdom needs. Not someone who'll tell me what I want to hear, but someone who'll tell me the truth. Even when it's hard. Even when it's scary. I can do that, I said, feeling a small spark of confidence ignite. I'm good at being honest. Usually to my own detriment. Not anymore. Not here. Here, your honesty is your strength. We sat like that for a moment, him kneeling before me, my hands in his, the marks on my skin casting a soft glow between us. What happens tomorrow? I finally asked. Tomorrow, he said, we face the court. Officially. I'll make the announcement of our engagement, I suppose you'd call it. Engagement. To a king. The word felt foreign in my mouth. And Lady Seraphina? His expression darkened slightly. Will hopefully accept the appropriate compensation and withdraw gracefully. But. He hesitated. But you don't think she will? I finished. She's proud. And she's been raised her entire life believing she would be queen. This is more than just a broken engagement to her. It's a stolen destiny. And I. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. I would ask you to be careful. To not underestimate her. She hates me, I said flatly. It wasn't a question. She hates what you represent. The disruption of her plans. But Elena, you must understand, in court, hate is just another tool. People will smile at you while plotting your downfall. They'll offer help while setting traps. Trust is rare. And valuable. Are you trying to scare me?
No.
I'm trying to prepare you. There's a difference. I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders. Okay. Then prepare me. Tell me what I need to know. And so he did. For the next hour, maybe more, he walked me through the basics of court politics. Who the major players were. Which families held power. Which alliances were strong. Which were fractured. He explained the delicate balance between the shifter pacts and the human nobility. The old grievances and new ambitions. It was overwhelming. But it was also necessary. By the time he finally stood to leave, you need rest and tomorrow will be intense. My head was spinning with names and titles and connections I'd need to memorize. Aldrich, I said as he reached the door. He turned back, eyebrows raised slightly at my use of his name. Thank you. For not throwing me to the wolves. He smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. You're one of us now, Elena. We don't abandon our own. Besides, he glanced at my hands, at the marks still glowing softly. Something tells me you're stronger than you think. The moon goddess doesn't choose the weak. After he left, I finally allowed myself to fully process everything, to really sit with the enormity of what had happened. I walked to the window, massive things that stretched from floor to ceiling, and looked out over the kingdom. From this height, I could see the city below, lights beginning to flicker on as evening fell. Beyond that, the forests, the mountains, all of it part of the realm I was now, somehow, supposed to help lead. The marks on my skin pulsed, and I wondered what they really meant, what powers they might hold, what responsibilities they carried. The old stories spoke of the moon marked as having special abilities, visions, heightened instincts, a connection to the goddess herself. But I felt none of that. Just the warmth of the marks and a bone-deep certainty that my life had irrevocably changed. A soft knock at the door announced the arrival of dinner. A servant, a girl maybe a year or two younger than me, who I recognized from the kitchens, brought in a tray laden with food. "Brought you some dinner, miss," she said, setting it down. Then she hesitated. "Elena, right?" "Yes," I said, grateful she'd used my name. "And you're Clara?" Her eyes widened. "You remember me?" "Of course. You make the best bread in the kitchen." She blushed with pleasure. "Thank you, miss." She glanced at my hands, at the marks. "We're all talking about it, you know, down in the servants' quarters. About what happened." "I can imagine," I said dryly. "No, I mean they're saying you're magic, that the goddess chose you, that you're going to be queen." She said it with such wonder, such awe, that I felt a pang in my chest. "I don't know about any of that," I admitted. "I'm just me, same as I was this morning." "But you're not, though," Clara said softly. "This morning you were one of us. Tonight you're—" She gestured vaguely. "Something more. Something more."
Was I?
Or was I just the same girl in fancier rooms with impossible expectations? I didn't have an answer. After Clara left, I picked at the food without much appetite. My mind was too full, too racing with everything that had happened and everything that was yet to come. Tomorrow I would face the court. Tomorrow I would step into a role I had no training for. Tomorrow I would prove whether I deserved the marks on my skin or whether the moon goddess had made a terrible mistake. The thought should have terrified me, and it did, partly. But there was something else too. A small, stubborn spark that refused to be extinguished. I'd spent my whole life being invisible, being overlooked, being the person in the background that no one really saw. Well, they were seeing me now. And maybe, just maybe, I could show them something worth looking at. I touched the marks on my arm, felt their warmth beneath my fingers. "I hope you know what you're doing," I whispered to the moon goddess, wherever she was. "Because I sure don't." The marks pulsed once, brightly, as if in response. And somewhere, deep in my chest, I felt something shift. Not quite confidence. Not quite certainty. But maybe the beginning of belief. That I could do this. That I was meant to do this. That walking through that wrong door had been the rightest thing I'd ever done. Tomorrow would bring challenges I couldn't imagine. Threats I couldn't predict. Obstacles I wasn't prepared for. But tonight I would rest. Tonight I would gather my strength. Because tomorrow, Elena the servant girl was gone. And someone new was being born in her place. I still didn't know who that someone was. What she would become. What she would achieve or fail at. But I was ready to find out. The moon goddess had set this path before me. Aldrich had chosen to walk it with me. Now I just had to be brave enough to see where it led. Even if every step scared me. Especially then. Because that's what real bravery was, after all. Not the absence of fear, but the choice to move forward despite it. I walked to the massive bed, still in my simple servant's dress, because the new clothes wouldn't be ready until tomorrow. The sheets were softer than anything I'd ever touched. The mattress seemed to swallow me whole. But as I lay there, staring up at the canopy above me, watching the marks on my hands cast dancing shadows in the dim light, I smiled. Just a little. Because despite everything, the fear, the uncertainty, the impossible situation I'd stumbled into, I was still here, still standing, still choosing to stay. And that was something. Tomorrow would come soon enough, with all its challenges and changes. But tonight, I was Elena, the girl with the moon mark, the woman who'd walked into the hall by mistake and walked out chosen by destiny. And somehow, impossibly, I was exactly where I needed to be, even if I didn't understand it yet. Even if the path ahead was shrouded in darkness. The moon goddess had lit the way with marks on my skin. All I had to do was follow. One step at a time. One breath at a time. One moment at a time. Starting tomorrow. But tonight I would rest. And dream of the impossible becoming possible. Of the wrong door leading to the right place. Of a servant girl becoming something more. The marks on my skin glowed softly in the darkness, a constant reminder. This wasn't a dream. This was real. This was my life now. And whatever came next, I would face it. Not because I was ready. Not because I was prepared. But because I'd already made the choice.
To stay. To try.
To see what destiny had in store for a girl who'd simply walked through the wrong door at exactly the right time.